Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. I'm going to talk about violence, and I'm going to show you a news broadcast about two incidents that involve violence, and I'm going to provide my commentary on the other side. I'm going to explain the problem. I'm going to talk about solutions to the problem. So check out these two news stories, and we'll continue the discussion afterwards.
That terrifying mall shooting here in this country in Maryland over the weekend. Tamron's here for Natalie. She's got more on that. Tamron, good morning to you.
Good morning, Savannah. Good morning, everyone. Investigators are still searching for a motive this morning behind that deadly shooting at a Maryland mall. A gunman opened fire inside a mall near Baltimore Saturday, killing two skate shop workers. Police say the shooter, 19-year-old Darian Marcus Aguilar, then took his own life. A woman who identified herself as his mother told reporters over the phone there were no clues.
He's never had a gun before, never been interested in guns, never been interested in anything like that. I don't know what happened.
Well, investigators have not been able to find any link between Aguilar and the victims. They did find a journal and say he expressed some general unhappiness with his life.
LaTarsha Newton is the mother of Baltimore City's youngest homicide victim killed so far this year. Someone gunned down LeVar Crawford this weekend. He was 16.
It killed me to see my son laying on that ground.
Newton says it happened as he was walking to the store. Police found Crawford's body on East 28th Street near Hugo Avenue at about 11:30 Saturday night. Newton believes a young man who'd been arguing with her son about something for the past several weeks shot and killed Crawford.
They shot him 7 times. Yes, in the back of his head, his neck. He didn't deserve that. It ain't like he was out here robbing, banging. He wasn't doing none of that stuff.
Crawford's murder happened on the same weekend as the tragic killings at Columbia Mall. But Newton says, unlike in Columbia, there was no outrage in Baltimore. The story about her son, virtually unnoticed.
What's happened in Columbia, that's in Columbia. What happened in Baltimore City is my son being killed. No coverage. Nobody saying, oh, we lost a 16-year-old.
But some observers, including Dr. Jeffrey Ross,
that's tragic,
a criminologist at University of Baltimore, say Newton's conclusion, unfortunately, is typical, and could also be because the shootings in Columbia happened at such a public place.
There's also compassion fatigue. People see this on a daily basis in a city like Baltimore, and they become a little bit numb to the daily reporting, the daily news with respect to people who are murdered and people injured.
Still, for this mother,
I'm angry and I'm hurt.
All right, here you have two situations. You have a shooting at a mall, and you have shootings in Baltimore City. Both of these incidents occurred in the Baltimore area. One is in the suburbs and the other one is in the city. And the grieving mother asked, why are these two stories being treated differently? Why isn't her son's story receiving the same type of attention that the Columbia Mall shooting received? And I'm going to just get to the heart of the matter. I'm going to talk about something that no one in the news broadcast mentioned. The fact of the matter is, the two stories were treated differently because of the race of the victims. In Columbia, the victims were white. They were in a suburban area, in a more affluent community. In Baltimore City, the victims were black. They were poor and black. And again, the coverage of these two stories is just a reminder of how black life is not valued in this country. Black life is taken for granted. Black life has no value in America. It has very little value, if any. And, the lopsided coverage is an example of that. And also, one of the people mentioned the fact that we have become numb to the violence. Every single day here in Baltimore, we hear about another young person being killed in gun violence. And we have become numb to the violence. We have accepted it as the new normal. Many of us have accepted it as normal. So for that reason, we don't react to stories of inner city violence the way we should react. We should treat what's happening in our inner cities like a crisis. And that's exactly what it is. It's a crisis. In cities all around America, every single day you hear about young African Americans being killed in the streets. And no one is really confronting the root cause of the problem. And that's why we continue to see this violence occur. Because our lives don't mean much in this country. Now I'm going to talk about how actually neither one of the problems are being addressed. You know, the problem of mass shootings aren't being addressed, and the problem of inner city violence is not being addressed. And, you know, I'll start with the mass shootings. We had the example of Newtown, where a shooter killed several children. And, you know, we've seen these stories over and over again where someone goes nuts and shoots up a school, or they shoot up a movie theater, or they shoot up some other public place, a post office, or somewhere else. And every time, you know, the country is in mourning. Eventually, you know, these situations happen so regularly that even in those types of situations where, you know, even where white people are the victims, America has become numb to it. And they become numb to it because it occurs frequently and because they realize that Congress doesn't have the heart or the courage to act. Congress does not have what it takes to make a difference. Congress is owned by the NRA. The NRA is the pimp and Congress is the prostitute. Congress will do anything that the NRA and the gun lobby and gun manufacturers tell them to do. Very few of them have the courage to stand up to the NRA. They would rather watch the babies die in Newtown than act. They would rather see more Columbines and more Columbia Mall shootings before they act. In fact, they are so apathetic and so disconnected from the black community and from just American community that if someone were to shoot up Congress, I doubt that would be enough to get them to enact tough gun control regulations. And, you know, quite some time ago, like shortly after I started my channel, I did a video about the shooting of a congresswoman. And, you know, I thought that would be America's wake-up call. And here we are, all this time later, all these shootings later, and nothing has happened because Congress doesn't have a backbone to act. They would rather be the puppet of the NRA. And, you know, most of the blame lies at the foot of the GOP. So, you know, that's part of the reason why we continue to see these mass shootings on a regular basis in this country. Now, with respect to inner city violence, that problem plagues America because America doesn't want to deal with the underlying causes of the problem. America has given up on the war against poverty. And instead of waging a war on poverty, they have waged a war on drugs. And that war is essentially a war on black people. You know, as documented in Michelle Alexander's excellent book, The New Jim Crow. And I highly recommend that everyone read that book. And on my channel, you'll see that I read that book and I did a review of that book. So check that out for more information about that book. Also, you know, they failed to address the problem of poverty. They failed to address the problem of high unemployment in the black community. They failed to address the problem of failing schools and the achievement gap between black people and white people, between rich and poor, between urban and suburban. And, the failure to address these problems contributes to the destruction of the black family. When someone doesn't have the means to provide for their family, they don't have the means to be a husband or to be there for their children. And that contributes to the erosion of the black family. And then when you have these conditions, such as poverty and unemployment and failing schools, when you combine those conditions with an influx of drugs and guns, what you have is a recipe for destruction. And that's what you see being played out in these inner cities around this country. We have to stop blaming the inner city people, the people that live in the inner city. We have to stop blaming our own people for a lot of these problems. Of course, we need to be responsible for ourselves and our communities, but we also need to look at the larger picture. And that picture is the socio-economic context within which the people live. Now, in order to address these problems, there are a couple of things that we need to do in our communities around the country. The first thing we have to do is push for strong gun control measures in our states, in our cities. If Congress won't act, we need to make sure that our local legislative offices act. We need to make sure that our local assemblies act, that they enact tough gun control laws. There is no reason why somebody that is mentally ill should be able to possess a firearm. Here in Maryland, there is no reason why someone should be able to purchase a shotgun without going through comprehensive checks, the same kind of checks that they go through when they purchase handguns. Also, we must fight in terms of inner city violence. We must push for raising the minimum wage. We must push for measures designed to improve our schools. We must push for jobs bills in Congress so that we can employ our young people. When someone is employed, when they have a job, they don't have to engage in selling drugs. And violence comes along with the drug trade. So if they had other options, if they had an opportunity to education, they would be less likely to engage in violent activity and other forms of criminal activity. We need to make sure that those kind of underlying problems are addressed. Also, what each and every single one of us can do in our community is we can join groups that are dedicated to fighting against violence. We can join local Stop the Violence organizations in our community. Here in Baltimore, we have an organization called 300 Men March in Baltimore. And we need to join organizations like that. If we don't have the time to join the organizations, we should contribute financially to these organizations so we can fight violence in our communities. And we can't just sit around waiting for someone to solve our problems. We have to solve our own problems as well. We need to be involved in our communities.